Yair, you sound a lot like your father. In many ways, when you talk, that there's a similar turn of phrase at times. He has dedicated his entire life to the state of Israel, to serving the state of Israel, and to eradicating the enemy of Israel, and not just Israel, the Western world, as I know. Do you have your own, I guess, longing to do something in a more formal capacity for your country?
Of course.
Yair Netanyahu, thank you so much for your time and for joining me here on the Erin Molan Show.
Thank you for having me, Erin. It's a pleasure.
I'm going to start with a pretty basic question. It might not be as easy to answer. What is it like being the son of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
It's a privilege. I'm a huge admirer of my father. I think he's one of the greatest leaders in Jewish history. He's been fighting for the survival of our tiny country and of our people for 3 decades now, against the whole world at some points, and against all the most powerful forces within Israel, our deep state, our media, and of course against all the hostile forces around Israel that want to annihilate us. His life project was preventing Iran from getting nuked, because we know that Iran would have used it right away on Israel, and they say so openly. And they were very close to getting nuked. He managed to delay them for 20 years, and then when it was not possible anymore, my father, together with President Trump, destroyed the Iranian nuclear program and saved not only us, but also Europe and America, because they were building intercontinental missiles that can carry nuclear weapon to America. And they already cover most of Europe, the range of their missiles, and prevented a nuclear World War III, because all those people that says that they are like, oh, we're against World War III, they were basically pushing de facto for a nuclear World War III, which this is exactly what would happen if Iran would have nukes. So it's a privilege, to be next to this really incredible person that I love so much and admire so much. But it's also very difficult, and it's very, it's tough because, again, because he's fighting this very strong forces inside Israel and outside Israel, the media and the deep state, outside Israel, very powerful forces as well. He was, not so favored by President Barack Obama for 8 years, and by President Biden for 3 years, and President Clinton for 3 years. And they were throwing at him everything they got. So it is hard, but it is what it is. But I love him, and I'm privileged to be his son, and I'm his biggest fan.
It's a really lovely way of putting it. And I lost my dad a couple of years ago, and he was a major general in the army, then an Australian senator, in fact, the most individually voted for Australian politician in history. He was incredible. And I struggled to find the words to articulate at the end to try and summarize how I felt about, the greatest person in my life. And I saw that James Packard once said about being his father's son, it was a privilege to be your son. And I had the exact same sentiment. And that's really lovely that that's how you feel about your dad as well. And that he gets to hear that as well whilst he's here. It must be lovely for him. What is he like as a human being? Because we always see this very strong, very staunch prime minister, world leader that has to be on the world stage because he has evil terrorists and, to be honest, apparent Western allies trying to destroy him all the time. What is he like away from that role?
He's being vilified by the liberal media for decades, whether it's in Europe and America and in Israel. And they build this cartoon, this caricature of him, which is 180 degrees to who he is. He's a very soft person. He has zero ego. He's very...
A lot of people will not believe that. He really has zero ego.
The thing that he forgive and forget, like no normal person would ever forgive and forget, and he forgive and forget after 5 minutes. He is very focused on his mission, and it's a very simple mission: to guarantee that the Jewish people will not go through a second Holocaust, and that the only Jewish state in the world will not be annihilated. It will be strong, and it will be strong economically and strong militarily, and that he will prevent from our Islamist genocidal enemies of annihilating us, because they put all their efforts and all their focus on doing that. And unfortunately, we don't have nice neighbors like you have in Australia. First of all, your only neighbor is the ocean, which is the best neighbor there could be. So I wish that we would have had that as well. And then you have lovely countries next to you like New Zealand and Papua New Guinea and this kind of places. And unfortunately, Israel is an island. It's not a geographical island, but it's a it's an island of Western civilization, of Judeo-Christian civilization, of the modern world, of freedom, of human rights, in an ocean of medieval, radical, tyrannical dictatorships that besides trying to destroy us, and they are treating women like they are the possession of the men. Well, most countries around us, most Muslim countries around us, officially have in their law that a woman is either the possession of her husband or her father. Legally, LGBT is illegal, punishable by death. In a lot of Muslim countries, like Qatar, like Saudi Arabia, like other countries, practicing Christianity is illegal. Smuggling a Bible, a Christian Bible, is illegal, and building a church is illegal. So we're this bastion of the modern world in this very dark, barbarian area.
It often, and it doesn't really bewilder me anymore because I've seen enough of the world since October 7 to just accept how crazy it is. But when leaders in Western countries who are not surrounded by suicidal terrorists, murderers, slaughterers, try to tell you how to handle the enemy on your doorstep that not only threatens to slaughter and kill you over and over again, but has proven its capability and its willingness to do so over and over again. Do you look at people like Macron, like Starmer, like Carney in Canada, and do you just think, come live in my dad's shoes for a week and see how you handle this kind of extremism, terrorism on your doorstep, slaughtering your people, then tell me if you still feel the same way?
So I think actually they do know what is radical Islam in these countries, because they have a lot of radical Islamist population in their own countries. In countries like the UK and France, they already experience horrible Islamist terror attacks in the not so distant past. And part of their reason of doing this move of recognizing the non-existent Palestinian Islamist terrorist state is because of this Islamist populations in their own countries that they are afraid of. Because besides the terror attacks that they've been unleashing on their Christian neighbors in these countries, they are also in the last 2 years burning down the streets of London, of Ottawa, of Paris, burning the French flags, the Canadian flags, the British flags, waving the Palestinian flags and flags of Hamas. And those weak, pathetic leaders, afraid of these populations, they probably also have a strong economical motivation when it comes to getting on the good terms with Qatar and Saudi Arabia and this kind of country that could be very generous for them once they leave office, and they can get a lot of deals. Macron is toward the end of his political career. He's not allowed to run again in France. So, I guess he's already thinking about all the billions he can get from Qatar in the near future. So that's a big motivation as well. And
Just on Macron quickly, how did it feel to have Macron say that your father would not be welcome in France, he would be arrested as a war criminal, but Al-Jilani, former ISIS, Al-Qaeda, come in, open arms, red carpet?
Yeah, nobody really cares about what France have to say since the 19th century, since Napoleon's defeat,
Donald Trump made that point too a
Yeah,
few days ago.
exactly, and definitely not Macron. Um, they didn't give good example when it comes to dealing with and fighting tyranny. They surrendered to Nazi Germany very fast and cooperated with the Nazis and gladly sent away all the Jews of their own people of the French Jews to the death camps. So we're not, officially the French state, right? Because I'm talking about the Vichy government, which was officially the government of France that were actively cooperated with the Nazis on the annihilation of France. We don't care what he got to say. The International Criminal Court is a joke. They didn't. They did not send arrest warrants to Assad. There's genocides going on in Africa, in Sudan for all this. They couldn't care less. Nobody care less. Definitely not France. Definitely not the ICC. We know that Karim Khan, the Muslim Pakistani um, prosecutor of the ICC, was involved with. There were
Hmm.
complaints of rape by
Hmm.
on him, and immediately when this came to the surface, this complaints of rape, he issued this arrest warrant. There's no jurisdictions of the International Criminal Court. They this is a complete joke. Again, as you said,
They are
Al
farcical,
Julani,
like
who
the
is a
UN.
former ISIS Al Qaeda
Farcical.
terrorist, is not a. And before he recognizes a Palestinian state, I would, warmly recommend Macron to grant finally independence to the occupied people under the French Empire, which is New Caledonia, actually very close to you guys in
Hmm.
Australia,
Yeah.
who are the natives there,
Yeah.
the Pacific Islanders natives, who are oppressed and occupied by France and demanding and protesting in recent years. Demanding independence from the French Empire. You have French Polynesia also in your area,
But
nowhere
that won't
near.
hurt the Jews.
Yeah,
That
but
won't hurt Israel
before,
or the Jews. So why would Macron do it?
don't be a hypocrite, right?
Yeah.
There's other territories that France is occupying, which is Corsica, Brittany, Basque territory, and the French basically have a neo-imperial sort of empire in Western Africa when they are issuing their currency, franc CFA, and they are controlling their economy and their resources. So I would think that it would be nice
Mm.
for France to finally grant independence to West Africa as well.
So, Yair, is your father a war criminal?
you know, uh, what this is so ridiculous. It's like saying, "Oh, Churchill is a war criminal." Well, now you're having the woke right and the woke Nazi right saying that Churchill is actually the bad guy of World War II. But let's focus on the mainstream, right? So, when there was World War II, that started because of Nazi aggression and violence. So, America and Britain were, fighting Nazi Germany, and they were bombing Nazi Germany and Nazi occupied Europe, and there were millions of innocent civilians that got killed. But the difference is that the Nazis were deliberately killing civilians, rounding women and children and elderly people and putting them in gas chambers. And and this is a deliberate genocide which they did against our people, against my own family. My grandfather's whole family was from my mother's side, the Hun family and the Taube family were all murdered in Poland in World War II, and like other 6 million people. And a real genocide is that there were 18 million Jews in the world in the eve of World War II, 1939. And now, 80 years later, there's only 15 million. We still didn't recover after 80 years. While the population of Gaza every several year, every decade is like multiplying itself since 1948 and 1967, and even increased since 1960. Since October 7. This is ridiculous. We are not obliged by the Geneva Convention and by the by the international law to supply food and water and electricity to the Gaza Strip if it is going to our to the combatants of our enemy. This is very clear in the Geneva Convention. And
It's
although
never been done
it's
by
never
any
been
other
done, and
country, has
although
never done this.
it's true, and although we're not obliged to, we do. So we are sending tons of food and water and electricity to a territory that invaded our territory on October 7, raped our women, beheaded our babies and children, murdered 1,200 people, including Australian citizens and American citizens and Canadians and British citizens, and then kidnapped 300, about 300 people, and they're still holding 50. So this is completely ridiculous. I mean, America and NATO countries and the UK are responsible for hundreds of thousands of civilian deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan just in recent years, not even going back to World War II, just in modern times. This is ridiculous. Piers Morgan always say about Israel, with all his anti-Semitic propaganda, but his own brother was serving in Afghanistan and Iraq, and there's hundreds of thousands of civilians, local civilians that were killed there. Nobody said that America and NATO and Britain committed genocide against us. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is an active war zone in the most densely populated urban area in the world, while our enemy Hamas is a terrorist organization that are targeting our civilians, but they're also hiding behind their civilians. So when they're shooting these rockets on our civilian cities, on our civilians in our cities, they're doing so. They're shooting the rockets from hospitals, from schools, from mosques. Their main headquarters of Hamas was beneath the main hospital in Gaza. They were hiding the hostages in kindergarten and in kindergartens and in hospitals. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is the first time that Israel is, well, it's not the first time, but Israel always have a different standard, not only from the countries surrounding us and from terror organization, but also different standards from what is expected from modern Western countries who are operating against terrorism and having wars like America and the Western world. So it's outrageous, it's ridiculous, but we Jews are used to be vilified and persecuted for almost 3,000 years, right? So it's just, I guess we're used to it by now.
Looking at the New York Times, because it's one thing to be an opinion host, a commentator, etc., that's on your own platform. It's an entirely different situation to be a newspaper in mainstream media with millions of consumers and to put something on the front page that is a lie. It does not matter how you spin it, how you twist it. The photo of the child who has a disease, who is not that shape because of starvation, but because of a disease that went around the world still doing irreparable damage. Their correction, not even that, no apology, went onto an obscure public relations X account of the New York Times. Like, it is insanity. That is something that Israel has to counter head on because the damage is so widespread and the reach is so big. Would you agree?
Yeah, so what happened is that the New York Times put on their cover a picture of a mother and a supposedly malnourished child because of the evil Israeli, famine, man-made famine, and it was revealed, and they confessed on their own today that this child has a genetic problem. I just want to remind that 45% of the marriages in Gaza are between first cousins, so there is some genetic problems there, and they presented it like he's suffering from starvation, but they also cropped the picture, the same picture they took. When you zoom out of it, the original picture, you see his brother. His brother is also a child, stands next to him and looks perfectly healthy, and his mother looks perfectly healthy. Notice that all the pictures of the so-called starvation in Gaza, they're all children, not a single adult. There is one picture of supposedly another child that's supposedly starving, but his mother is clearly obese, double chin. So this is like come on, a lot of the pictures are turned out to be from Yemen from 2013 and stuff like that. Some of them are AI with like 12 fingers in each on each hand. You know, this is ridiculous. Israel like is literally bringing in journalists to the cross border stations where inside Gaza, where you have all the hundreds of trucks filled with food and any other thing that they want, like much more needed than the whole population of Gaza, just hundreds and thousands. And it's just sitting there in the sun rotting because the United Nations refused to pick it up, because this is an organized campaign, you know, run by Qatar, who deliberately want this, you know, campaign and this blood libel ahead of their sponsored UN convention on September, so to have as many countries as possible rewarding Hamas for October 7 massacre by recognizing a Palestinian state. So this is what it's all about. This is just an artificial campaign needed. And by the way, I've been talking to generals that fought in Iraq and Afghanistan for NATO, and they say that when they were besieging a town or a city held by ISIS or Al Qaeda that they wanted to overtake, they wouldn't let anything come in. The American and British Army and European Army, and they were like, it's a city, it's a town. You have regular civilians just hold there as hostage by Al Qaeda or whatever. They wouldn't let anything come in until Al Qaeda or ISIS surrender in this town. So, you know, come on. And we don't do that. And we actually do supply the food and aid that later Hamas is immediately taking over it and then sell it back to their own people. So the aid's supposed to go for free to the Palestinian population. And then Hamas steals it and sell it with very high prices for their own population. They couldn't care less that their people are, the well-being of their people. They're hiding in the tunnels. They have all the food in the world, and then the extras they just sell to their own people. This is why Israel and the United States created this new mechanism of Gaza Humanitarian Fund, which
to go direct.
deliver the aid directly to the population. It's an American NGO. But then when they're delivering the food for the population, Hamas comes in and shoots on their own civilians who's trying to take the food. And then they said that the Israeli army did this. And then sometimes they shoot on the Israeli army that's protecting the Gaza civilian population. And then the Israeli army have to fire back. And then they say, oh, you see, the Israeli army fired. This
you can't win.
Crazy.
You cannot win. Can I back you up on the Iraq reference that you just made? I mentioned my dad earlier, who was a major general. He actually ran the war in Iraq for a year on behalf of the American coalition forces. He was very rare for an Australian general to be put in that job, including the first democratic election in decades that they'd had in Iraq. He ran that. He worked with General Petraeus. And he then, post that experience of running the war, he wrote a book called Running the War in Iraq. So he commanded the American troops as well as NATO forces. He was then sent into Israel to investigate, because that's what we do to our democratic ally. We send in generals to investigate. He was part of a UK, American, and Australian group of retired generals. And the front page headline after his report had come out said, and I quote, and the ABC in Australia even ran this, Yair, so you can imagine how much this would have hurt them. He said, "They put us to shame in how they conduct war." And your father was prime minister at that stage. And my dad had a moral compass unlike any other. He was an incredible general, an incredible human being. And having an experience of running a war for a year in Iraq, he made that assessment of the way that Israel conducts warfare.
Sounds like it. And yes, a military urban warfare
John
expert,
Spencer?
yes, he came to the conclusion after thorough research that the civilian casualty for combatant ratio in the war in Gaza is 1-to-1. So one civilian killed to every one combatant. While the NATO, in the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, was like something like 7-to-1, which means that for every terrorist of Al-Qaeda or Taliban that is killed by the NATO forces, about 7 innocent civilians are killed. And that was pretty good as well, compared to other wars in history. And
Yeah.
so, usually is 1 to, I don't know, 1,000, right? In most wars in history, and much more even. So, Israel is doing more than any country in history, in human history, to assure the lives of the lives of the civilians of its enemy that hate us, that participated on October 7th. I just want to remind you that it's not just Hamas. On October 7th, the first wave of invaders was Hamas terrorists. But then when the border was breached and it was open, you saw videos of all this innocent civilian Gazans, I'm saying, quote unquote, coming in with their flip-flops and shorts and, whatever, and pillaging and raping whatever women they found at the music festival and kidnapping several. For example, Noah Gamani was very famous when she was abducted from the music festival with her boyfriend, who's still hostage in Gaza. They were abducted by Gaza civilians. They just randomly saw them there, ran into them that just came in. So, you have these videos of the hostages, of women, of elderly people, of children, of babies paraded in the streets of Gaza on October 7th. Some of them are dead, some of them are alive. And you see all of the population of Gaza, of the streets, whatever that you see in the videos, they're all cheering, spitting on them, hitting them. And, even, there's not a single Gazan that saved a hostage from the 2 million people in Gaza. In Nazi Germany, there were...
During the Holocaust,
in the Holocaust, in Nazi Germany, there were Germans that saved Jews, including Nazi party member Oskar Schindler, who saved 1,200 Jews. But you don't have a single citizen in Gaza that saved a single hostage. So,
Everything you say is absolutely true, but it is undeniable, isn't it, that there is suffering in Gaza? Of course there is. It is a war zone. Now, and by the way, before people want to jump in, I am a commentator. I give my opinion. I'm not doing this as a journalist. I believe every element of suffering in Gaza, I solely put on the heads of Hamas. Every single second of suffering. But that doesn't mean that we all walk away and we say, well, it's not our fault, so let's not do something. How does this war end so the suffering ends? And my perspective, it's pretty simple. Give back the hostages, lay down your arms, Hamas. And if the entire world pressured them and wouldn't accept any less, this war would end today.
Yes. So first of all, of course, there's suffering for the civilians in Gaza. Have there been any war in history that the population didn't suffer? We suffer as well. Nobody cared that for 20 years, since we pulled out of Gaza and created a de facto Palestinian state that the whole world demanded us, there was a Palestinian state. When Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005, we kicked out 10,000 Israelis, Jews, from their homes that they were living there for generations. We kicked them out from their homes. We tear down the synagogues. We took the bodies out of the graveyards, out of the graves. We gave Gaza until the last inch of their demands and created an autonomous Palestinian state that they could do whatever they want with it. And then Hamas was democratically elected and took over the Gaza Strip and started right away firing rockets on our civilian cities. Nobody cared about all these children on the cities and towns in Israel South that lived for 20 years with constant bombardments and missiles from Gaza. And for what excuse? For what excuse they did October 7th? Nobody cared about the suffering of the civilians that had been raped and burned alive and beheaded and on October 7th. Nobody remembers that. And, nobody cares about Israeli civilians suffering under the missiles from Iran, from Hezbollah, from Yemen. I was just now in Israel at 2 weeks. I think you were there too during the war.
I was, yeah.
So,
during the war.
Can Australians... I think most Australians cannot imagine that you're not safe in your own home.
A foreign concept to the vast majority of people who weigh into this from a ridiculous perspective with suicidal empathy. They have not experienced a thing like it. Never
Yeah,
will, and it's very easy to march in the streets of Sydney waving a Hamas flag,
yeah.
isn't it, when you're not running from their
There,
bombs?
there is, there is a siren, and you have few seconds to go to the shelter if you want to stay alive, because the missile can fall randomly, and of course they're always targeting their missiles to our cities and to our population centers, and it can just randomly fall on your house. And with the ballistic missiles
Mhm.
from Iran, even if you're in the safe room, you're gonna get killed if there is a
Yeah.
direct hit. So
I
you're
went
not
out
safe
to the
in your
impact
own.
sites
Sorry.
during that war. I went out to the impact sites during that war. I was on the ground. I went out there, and civilian buildings, residential blocks completely annihilated. You look at what Israel targeted in Iran: nuclear facilities, military facilities, generals who make decisions that kill innocent people. The stark contrast, we kept hearing this tit for tat. There was no tit for tat. It was a just war against an enemy who was building towards nuclear capability, and civilians, a little girl with cancer who got killed.
Yeah. So, and regarding how the war can end, the war could have ended on October 8th. The war could end today. The war could end tomorrow if President of Turkey Erdogan wants to, and if
Mhm.
the Sheikh or the Emir of Qatar, Thani, and his mother, who's the de facto ruler, Sheikh Hamoza, wants to. Why is that? Because the leaders of Hamas are living, in luxury and in great conditions on their soil in Turkey and in Hamas
So they are
and in
still
Qatar.
there because they're denying that, aren't they? But they are.
Oh,
I've
what do you
spoken to
mean?
a
They're meeting
couple of
them.
very,
The Erdogan,
yeah.
Erdogan, and the foreign minister of Turkey hosted the Hamas delegation with red carpet, I think, about 2 weeks ago, and they put it up on their social media accounts of the formal Turkish government. They have official headquarters in Turkey and in Qatar. So theoretically, if they want to, they can, you know, come to these leaders of Hamas and say, listen, either you tell your folks in Gaza to surrender and get a safe passage through a ship to whatever Arab Muslim country that will take you and to release the Israeli hostages, or we are extraditing you to the United States, because the United States have bases in both countries. And put it this, with all the talks about jihad and being a shaheed and all of that, these people love their life, they love their good lives, and put that this ultimatum, they would tell their people to release their hostages and to surrender, and the war will be over tomorrow, and the suffering of
Imagine
the
if
Gaza.
every celebrity shared that. Every
Yes,
world leader, every Macron, every Starmer, every Carney, every Albanese shared that and went
nobody, no,
hard in on that.
no country and no government and no population. There's no protest against Qatar and Turkey. Qatar or Turkey are the only Muslim Brotherhood countries in the Middle East. The Muslim Brotherhood has been outlawed in all the other Arab Muslim countries in the Middle East. It is the ideology of the umbrella organization and the ideology of ISIS, of Al Qaeda, of the Taliban, and of Hamas. These countries are sponsoring Hamas. These countries are responsible for October 7th that started all of this. And those countries, in Qatar, it's not even a real country. It's 300,000 citizens. It's basically a tribe that that have another few millions of slaves they imported from South Asia. They are, punishing by death LGBT people. They're forbidden practice of Christianity, and it's very interesting that a lot of so-called American woke right, so-called Christians, getting paid by Qatar and to spread blood libels in Israel, while Qatar is formally denying practice of Christianity, or there is not a single church
Mhm.
in Qatar. There are
Yeah.
countless of beautiful ancient churches in Israel that we protect them, and there's a thriving Christian community in Israel. Actually, the only Christian community in the Middle East that its numbers are increasing, while
Growing.
the rest of the Middle East, the Christian population is going through ethnic cleansing and genocide. And for example, the holy city of Bethlehem, where Jesus Christ was born. So up until the Oslo Accords in 1993, it was under Israeli control, and the Christian population under Israel was about 80%. Since we gave the control to the Palestinian Authority in 1993 to today, Today, under Palestinian control, the Christian population went down to 10%. So, so there is this new phenomenon, and, the fact that the left, in the Western world and in America is deranged and communist and anti-Semitic and, want to tear down and burn down the Western civilization and the nation states. They hate Israel and they hate America and they hate Australia. We know that, this is nothing new. But this new trend that's starting in the last year of anti-Semitic, neo-Nazi woke right that basically, whitewash all the most radical Islamist regimes in the Middle East. And, this is insane. And trying to vilify Israel being as the enemy of Christians and Christianity, this is insane. This is the first time in I don't know how many, years that Christian sites are in the Holy Land are protected and are accessible for all Christians around the world. The Europe went to crusades in the Middle Ages because of the Muslim, blocking the holy sites in the Holy Land for Christians. So this is completely artificial. It's completely a bubble. It's a complete bubble in the podcast sphere of people that are getting paid a lot of money by Qatar, and there's a whole bot psyop by Iran and China, Russia, and Qatar of millions and millions of bots of operated from those countries pretending to be conservative Christian Americans. There's a whole New York Post expose about this matter from I think about 2 months ago. So.
So do you think it's not having as much of an impact as we might think for people who live in that Twitter X sphere, constantly seeing it, thinking they're generating massive numbers of viewers and engagement, thinking people are actually believing this complete fallacy, this BS? Do you actually think it's not maybe as effective
First
as,
of all,
we fear?
the more you repeat a lie, the more people believe it, right? Goebbels said that when you repeat a lie again and again and again, it becomes truth. And nobody knows propaganda better than the Palestinians in Qatar. And you have 2 billion people or 2 billion Muslims in the world that they have free access to internet. Well, not all of them, not the people of Iran, for example, but in other places. So yeah, of course you're gonna get likes, and it's not like only American citizens are allowed to like your anti-Semitic posts or share it or comment to it and increase the engagement. And you have this whole foreign bot psyop that was discovered by New York Post. So, but of course, that the purpose is to change that and to really make it real, because right now it's not real, it's not organic. But the purpose of this propaganda is to convince the average American, the average Australian, the average European with this lies. So.
Yair, you sound a lot like your father in many ways when you talk. That there's a similar turn of phrase at times. I wonder if you have political ambitions yourself. He has dedicated his entire life to the state of Israel, to serving the state of Israel, and to eradicating the enemy of Israel, and not just Israel, the Western world, as I know. Do you have your own, I guess, longing to do something in a more formal capacity for your country and your people?
Absolutely not. You need to have
That was quick.
The power center in Israel although the left in Israel is a tiny minority, the radical, woke, progressive left is a tiny minority, but they control 100%, almost 100% of the media, 100% of the deep state, of our judiciary, of state prosecution. And I'm not as nearly as strong as my dad, So, I suffered enough for all this stuff, all these horrible things they do to him for the last 30 years. So, I don't wish this upon myself. But I am very passionate about these matters. But I don't want to be the gladiator myself,
Tell me, and I know we'll wrap this up, we're running out of time. You've been so generous with me. do you call him, like, if you're having, a bad day, or, you've broken up with a girlfriend? Like, it's so hard for us to imagine him in a father role. Like what is that relationship like with you guys? Because you know how busy he is, you know how much is on his plate, but do you still reach out for very normal things?
Well, we're very close, all of us, our family, my brother and my mother. We're very close to each other. We've been through everything together, and we have our, each other, um, always for ourselves. But it's he's it's very hard to get a hold of him on the phone usually, because sometimes it takes me a week to get a hold of him on the phone. He's working almost 24 hours a day. He's sleeping maybe 4 or 5 hours. He's working, like, the overload of work, and constant crisis after crisis after crisis. It's so many things on his plate for so many years, and you see people that work for him or on their 20s, they collapsing from exhaustion, and he just keep going. So
Yeah. Do you
I
worry
talk to
about
him, but
him?
not every,
Do you
all of a
worry?
sudden about.
Yeah. His welfare, about his health, about what he's exposed to daily.
He's he's a Superman. He is going through things and enduring things that would have make any sane person, go crazy, or jumping off the cliff or something. And he's just persistent for 30 years. And when I ask him how he do that, he said, just because I'm focused on my goal.
Yeah. Has he achieved his goal? And Iran was a major part of that.
That was a major turning point, and it got us closer to the goal. We're still we're still a country under threat of annihilation, yes, but in much better place than it was until a month, 2 months ago, right? Until the war with Iran. But we are still the only country in the world that its own legitimacy of existence in any borders is in doubt, and that is still under existential threat.
It would be remiss of me not to ask about your mum, in terms of the stress and the impact on her. I'm sure she's also insanely proud, like you are, of him. But what kind of, she must be a major support to you boys, to your dad. Often women, or partners, not women, partners don't get the credit they deserve.
My mom is, I think, as strong as my dad, and she's always there to support him for 30 years. And she's been going through a lot. Our deep state and our media uh, don't have the basic, standards that even the mafia has, that you don't involve women and children, you don't involve wives and children. They don't have that, minimum standard. And they've been going after my mom, not because of her, just as a tool to get to my dad for 30 years now. And she's been through a lot, and she's enduring. She's the first lady of Israel that is working while her husband is the prime minister. She's a child therapist in schools in Israel, and she's a very strong woman.
You're amazing. Yair, thank you so much for your time, for being so open and honest with us. And I'm so grateful for sharing part of your life. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Erin. I appreciate that.